Hey, Brandon, this is Chris Nolte calling from Propel. Making a video about the catalog of Tern electric bikes. I never actually asked what Q and P and S mean. This is Brandon from Tern, right? Oh, I'm really sorry, man. All right. Thanks so much. Sorry, dude. All right.
What Brandon was that?
I don't know. For those of you that are familiar with Tern, they started with one electric bike and then they added another, and now their catalog has gotten pretty big. Can be kind of confusing for us as a bike shop at times to say hey, does this one make sense or this one? And really what I wanted to do is make a video just going through the full catalog and just give you a little bit better perspective on the different models, some of the different specs between them, and what makes one better than the other and that sort of thing. Now usually we'll do this sort of thing at a bike show. We have Eurobike or Interbike or that sort of thing, but those are not really happening, so I figured we'll do our own virtual version and hope that you guys enjoy it. Probably end up doing more of these for other brands in the future, so let me know what you think. Does this work? Do you want to see more? So we've done video reviews of most of these models individually, but I'm just gonna go through them. First it's families of bikes. Tern has a variety of different models. So they have the Vektron, which is really where they got their start with electric bike. And they were one of the first companies to introduce a folding bike with the Bosch motor, which was a really big deal at the time. And since then, they've expanded that lineup to have a couple different versions of that bike. But basically, it's a folding bike with 20-inch wheels, front and rear, and it's really a folding bike, but it really rides more like a full-size bike. It's a little bit more sturdy and robust than maybe some other folding bikes out there on the market. And the Vektron also has updated colors. So for the Q9, it's going to be available in a red color, where the S10 is going to be available in the silver, as well as a black with a bronze highlight on it, which previously it was a black with a blue highlight on it. And that really speaks to Tern's heritage. I mean, they've been a folding bike company from the start and really always focusing on innovation and performance and really focusing on a higher quality product. But they've made some departures from that more recently and become a bit more of a mobility company. I think that in a lot of ways started primarily with this other model called the GSD, or Get Stuff Done as some would like to call it, or the less politically correct Get Done. That bike, it's a compact cargo bike and it's really capable of quite a bit. It was introduced several years ago, but this past year, they did a complete overhaul. They introduced a new motor, they added a belt drive, several different drivetrain options, and all sorts of new accessories, just kind of improving upon what they had previously been doing. Then we get into the HSD. This family of bikes, you're going to see the most variety. There's a lot of different options, and I guess because it's kind of one of those bikes that can just fit so many different use scenarios, and it kind of extends beyond the capabilities where most other electric bikes stop, where most electric bikes on the high end of their weight capacity is somewhere around 60 pounds, where this HSD is 130 pound weight capacity on the rear rack, and then the GSD is over 200 pounds. So they kind of cover a pretty wide range there. That HSD is great for one kid, a smaller kid, even a bigger kid, that sort of thing. But the GSD is good for a couple of kids, even two bigger kids for that matter, which is pretty nice. And then the Vektron can carry kids as well, but that will just be able to carry one smaller child in a seat. The weight capacity on that rear rack is about 60 pounds, so it can accommodate a rear child seat, which generally those have a weight capacity of somewhere around 45 pounds. So between the seat and the child, you're in pretty good shape. Well, now that we covered more or less the basics of the Tern lineup, I want to get more into the details of the specific differences of the various bikes. So diving a little bit deeper into the Vektron specifically, we can talk about what makes the Vektron more unique. And it's a folding bike. It's 20-inch wheels, front and rear. It's fully equipped as a commuter bike, so it's got a fender, rack, lights, etc. It offers a high level of adjustability to fit a variety of rider heights, ranging from somewhere in the high 4-foot range and upwards of the mid 6-foot plus. Because it has an adjustable stem and a dual telescoping seat post, it can really fit a variety of different riders. And these features you'll see shared across the full lineup of Tern electric bikes, which is really nice and something that I think a lot of people appreciate. Because having one bike that can fit a variety of different riders, sometimes you can share it between friends or, significant others or whatever. But also having that adjustability, they also have a folding feature, which is on the Vektron, but it's also on some of the other models, so the handlebars all fold. But there's a few different models of the Vektron. They start with the Q9. The Q9 is a 9-speed derailleur version and has the Active Line Plus motor on it. Before it had the Active Line motor, but recently they upgraded it to the Active Line Plus. And then the S10 version of the Vektron, which was their original flagship version, they upgraded that motor on that bike as well, which previously had the Active Line Plus, and then they went to the Performance line. So now it has actually the most amount of torque that is available for that sort of lineup of motors, which is 65 Newton meters, where the Active Line Plus has 50 Newton meters of torque. Really, both of those are plenty of power, but if you wanted to have a little extra oomph, it's nice to have that Performance line motor. It's going to help you starting out, going up hills, just so you don't have to work as much if you really want to get going a little bit faster. Now, I should note that both of these bikes are limited to 20 miles an hour, or in Europe, you'll see probably 15.5 miles an hour or 25 kilometers per hour, which is the regulation in those places. But overall, these bikes are really popular, and it's a nice way to go if you need something a bit more compact. You need to have the ability to fold it down. A lot of times people might store it in their trunk, or they might, bring it on an elevator or store it in their apartment in a closet, that sort of stuff. And that's kind of one of the things that Tern is particularly good at is, making these compact bikes that you can store and you can make maybe a bit more portable or stowable. And I think a lot of people really appreciate those features, especially when you're using them in more of an urban environment where space is at a bit of a premium. So the GSD starts with the S10, and then they have the S10 LX, and then they have the S00 LX, and then they have the R14, which doesn't have the LX, even though it's actually an LX, but we'll get to that. What is the LX anyway? I actually had to look this up because they got all these names, and I think they actually come generally from the car industry. And they said luxury crossover. I don't know if Tern intended this, but that kind of makes sense because the LX version on the GSD means that it has some of these upgraded features on it. And that includes brake lights, an upgraded headlight with a high beam and low beam, as well as a upgraded suspension seat post. So I'd say that's luxury. It's nice. But the feature that all of the GSDs share is the same motor. It's that Bosch Generation 4 cargo line motor, as I mentioned before, plenty of torque on there. And then the S10 LX is, you guessed it, a little bit more luxury. So it's got basically the same derailleur on it, but then it has the upgraded seat post, tail lights, etc. Then we go from there to the S00 LX. You have this 00, and you might be wondering, what does that actually signify? And the idea is actually it's the NVOLO hub, which is a continually variable transmission. And so there's 00s and made to be like a infinity sign because you effectively have an infinite amount of gears that you can switch through, which is pretty nice. Now, this CVT is something that's becoming pretty popular in the e-bike space because it's really easy to use, it's very low maintenance, and you can also pair it with a belt drive, which I think a lot of people appreciate. And this is a big upgrade that came this year that a lot of people were asking for and anticipating. So you now have this S00 available with the belt drive and the NVOLO hub, which I think is a really nice setup and probably one of the better ways to go if you want really one of the lower maintenance, easier to use versions of the GSD. And the S00 LX is going to be available in the ever popular Beetle Blue color, as well as a new color for Tern called Rhino Gray. But they didn't stop there. They introduced this new version called the R14, and this model is very special. So this is the first model that Tern is introducing with the roll-off hub. Now, the roll-off also has a belt similar to the NVOLO, but the shifting experience is a bit different. Now, you shift the gears with the push of a button, and it has 14 individual indexes, where the NVOLO shifts more continuously, as it's a CVT, or continually variable transmission, where the roll-off is more like a traditional gear set, but actually the gears are inside the hub. It's also a very low maintenance system. It's relatively easy to use, but there's a bit more of a learning curve in my experience there, because you do have to let off your pedaling a little bit to allow it to engage. But once you get used to it, it becomes pretty natural. And we found it to be pretty popular and a nice way to go if you want something maybe a little bit more performance oriented, but still very low maintenance. This bike, I should note, also comes with 2 batteries, where the other bikes it's just an option to have 2 batteries. But all the bikes will have the hardware by default to accommodate 2 batteries, which is a really nice feature from my perspective. And the R14 is available exclusively in the Forge Gray color. Now, one other note about colors, I know a lot of you might be watching from other parts of the world. I should note that in different places throughout the world, you might see these varieties in different colors. I'm speaking specifically about North America, where we're based. So you should see the same sort of lineup for these different models. You might see a different speed, where in the US it's 20 miles an hour, and in Europe you might see 15.5 miles an hour, but for the most part, all the other specs are more or less the same. Then we get into the HSD. This family of bikes, you're going to see the most variety. There's a lot of different options, and I guess because it's kind of one of those bikes that can just fit so many different use scenarios. It's not quite as heavy duty as the GSD, but it really extends the capabilities of what a normal bike can do. It still fits the same sort of category and space as other electric bikes. But the HSD, it was introduced with the P9 version. That model is a 9-speed derailleur version, so that normal kind of mountain bike style gears on it, with the Active Line Plus version. Now there's one of the variety of the P9 that's called the P9 Performance, and that one's going to be a little bit more limited in availability, but basically it's more or less the same bike, a 9-speed derailleur bike with a performance line motor, so a little bit more torque. That active line motor has 50 Newton meters and the performance line has 65, and that's really generally how we measure power. I know a lot of companies want to make you believe that measuring watts is really the most important measurement, but from my experience, people just want to get up the hill and have an easier time starting out, and torque is really one of those things that's going to provide the most variance there. Moving on from the P9, they also have a model called the S8i. Now, this is another belt drive version. It's something that has been particularly popular for us. This is also going to have that Active Line Plus motor and has an 8-speed Shimano internally geared hub. So you're going to have the same sort of indexes you do on the traditional gears, but instead of being on the outside like you'll find on a mountain bike, all the gears are inside and sealed. The nice thing about this is it's very low maintenance, really easy to use. One of the benefits of its internal hub is you can shift from a standstill. Once you come to a stop, you can shift down. It's helpful in an urban environment. Not to mention having a belt is really helpful if you have to carry the bike or put it in your car or whatever the case may be. So I think a lot of people appreciate that bike for many of those reasons. This bike has the Active Line Plus motor, which is really well suited for urban environments. However, it's not quite as much torque as the Performance line, so if you really wanted something to really power you up those hills, you might want to opt for something with that more higher performance motor. That being said, if you're a relatively fit person, or if you're not in a real rush, having a motor that's not quite as powerful, it's still going to get you up the hill because you're using that motor like a transmission. You're able to use those gears in the back of the bike, but it's just not going to get you up the hill quite as fast. From there, we also have the S Plus version. This bike's been really popular for us as it's one of the few bikes that are available with this automatic drivetrain. So it has that same NVOLO hub that I spoke about previously with the GSD, but the only difference here is that it's fully automatic. So the way it works is you program in your cadence or how fast you're pedaling. You say, hey, I want to pedal at this rate of speed. And actually the bike shifts to try and maintain that cadence. Now, I find that if you want to ride a bit more sporty, you might prefer a traditional derailleur or something like that. But for those that don't really want to worry about their drivetrain, and it's a nice way to go. And I think this is also really helpful for people maybe they're not as experienced shifting gears. I think that that's actually something that's relatively common with people in the US, maybe not as common in other places where people are more used to biking. I mean, it's also relatively common that people know how to shift manual cars. In the US, this is not so common, but that's a story for another time, or maybe another channel. I'm not doing one of those channels. Now, all these bikes we've discussed so far have the standard Class 1 in the US 20-mile-an-hour limit, but Tern naturally got a lot of people in the US asking for a bike that's a little bit faster. And so they decided to deliver on that, and they introduced the HSD S11. This is the only bike currently in their lineup that has a 28-mile-an-hour top speed. And I believe this bike's actually only available in the US. It might be available in New Zealand as well, because I think they might have regulations to allow that, but again, another time. The S11 has the new Bosch Performance Sport motor. This motor has the same amount of torque as the standard Performance line motor, but it just basically moves the top speed up to 28 miles an hour as opposed to 20 miles an hour. Now, that being said, it's not quite as easy to get up to that 28. It's more, from my perspective, like a 25-mile-an-hour bike, but it's still kind of nice to be able to pedal a bit beyond the 20 miles an hour and get some assistance. So, you know, if you want something to go a little bit faster, this might be the bike for you. We found this to be pretty popular, and I think a lot of people really appreciate this if they have a bit of a longer commute or that sort of thing. Well, I think that's about all I wanted to cover for right now on these bikes. I'm sure that I missed something, and feel free to leave it in the comments if you feel like there's something special about these bikes that you want to call out, or maybe you have your own personal experience, or if you have a question that you want to ask, just leave it in the comments below. We've done reviews on pretty much all these bikes on an individual basis, but we'll continue to do more updates, and as I said, we'll do a video on the new accessories and that sort of thing. So you can definitely stay tuned for that, and I look forward to seeing you guys in a future video. Well, see you soon. My construction injury is building some stuff. We're building a new warehouse in Delaware, showroom too. We're hiring. Call me. I promise you won't get these injuries, just I will. Hopefully my insurance guy's not watching this one.